I should have learned this a long time ago, to be honest, and I think it's a little bit of me just hitting the ground running and not wanting to spend too much time on the theory of things, and just I like to be hands-on. But I noticed something when I took a bunch of shots from bigger movies from Shot Deck, and I put them into Vinci, and I analyzed the colors, I analyzed the exposure. First, I noticed where the skin tones are falling. So sometimes when it is a warmer scene, they do go more into the orange and yellow and stuff, more so towards the yellow. Something interesting that I found is that they kept their highlights on the skin tone, like the faces or the arms or whatever the light is actually hitting the subject, at the 60% mark and not exceeding. Sometimes it does exceed a little bit, but most of the time it was actually sitting on that line or below, depending on the scene. It was really interesting because a lot of times I used to expose to bring up the subject a little bit more so you could see them clearer and stuff, and I noticed that my images were becoming a little more flatter, and I wasn't sure how to light my scene in post-production. Like, I would light the scene, okay, I'd expose everything fine, I wouldn't, exceed, I won't clip my highlights, I won't bury my shadows, but I just never understood where things within the frame should fall. And I noticed that a lot of times now I expose for the subject. Well, they do say light the scene and not the face, light scenes, not faces, I guess is what they're saying. It matters, of course, in the context of the scene, but if you focus on not clipping the highlights, that's number one. And number two is, when you're exposing a subject, make sure that their skin, the highlights on their skin, does not exceed the 60. Pretty interesting, and it really creates much more depth in the images that you're creating. I've been doing that more and more and applying it more and more, and I feel like it is creating a big difference in my images and stuff. Sometimes I feel like the background is a little darker and stuff than I'd like it to be. What it's gonna come down to is how much lights you have and how you can light the scene and create those layers of exposures. So if I like the way my skin looks right now and it is sitting on the 60, when that happens, if the background is dark and it's too dark for me, that I don't like it, it's too much of a separation between me and the background, the subject and the background, then I would light the background a little more, and you'd need more light sources. In this case, I have some of the practicals right here that are just lighting up the background enough to where I feel like, from what I see from the monitor, it's a pretty good amount of light. Now, there might also be a little bit more light in one side of the frame than the other, so you'd have to balance things out. I feel like this is a perfectly exposed image. Now, I am using a natural light, which is spilling into the room as well. So that's another thing. You don't control natural light as much as you would control artificial lighting, which I do have a bunch of lights here that I love from Small Rig. Around this time of day, I feel like the natural light is more than sufficient to have a great exposure, so I'm testing it out. It is a little easier to work with because it's a lot faster to set up, and the light source is great right here. Thanks for listening. This is the Anamorphic 50mm lens that I'm testing out on my Sony FX3.